why do you need adversity to be great? Say hello to my wife. I'm having what's known as a wardrobe malfunction. She is cutting my hair. This has been a dream of hers.
You've endeared me to your millions of viewers.
To humiliate me on the air.
I always cry even though it isn't allowed. So proud.
You make me want to be a better streamer.
A better streamer.
No, definitely not that. Do you need adversity to be great?
Your skill is you tee up your guests and you make them look, so good.
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. Gets me all fired up, man. Such a good interviewer. I'm ready to go. Jump to the screen. But no, so true.
They can't see I'm dancing by myself.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.
and I always will look ugly. That's why I've had to put this fur on my face. My daughter, when she was very young, she used to refer to this as fur. So it's the only way to mask the ugliness. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of CoronaTV. I hope you are well. I hope your family is well. We are living through challenging times. Sometimes I say awful, sometimes I say confusing, sometimes I say challenging. I don't like to use the word unprecedented because I just don't like that word, but sometimes awful is the best way. And sometimes the times are good. Sometimes when we connect with one another and when we are inspired and when we can help one another, there is that beautiful shining light that keeps us hopeful. That's why I describe the show now as a show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, maybe a little bit of marketing. I kind of like that balance. In fact, I think that's the balance I'm going to hold into my life. Hey, Rox, I haven't seen you in or heard from you in years and years and years. What software do you use? Well, that would be telling, right? Oh, you asked me so I could tell you. I'm using a piece of software called StreamYard, and let me tell you, I am an evangelist for these guys like you cannot believe. I love them to pieces. It's just amazing. It's amazing what you can do now in video, which is the hardest medium of them all to be able to share or broadcast or be able to stream. A couple of hellos. Hello, Joey. I don't know if I've said hello to you. And Jan. Jan says we're up to the challenge. We have to be. Yeah, we do have to be, but sometimes it's hard to keep your head, above water. Sometimes it's just really, really hard. So anyway, I am excited because I'm not excited because of that. I'm excited because I should be. Why am I not seeing my? I should be seeing something, but I'm not. Well, that's interesting. Oh, I know why. Because I'm still making mistakes, apparently. I have to do this. You see, it is a work in progress. I'm looking at that and I'm going, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. I tell you what does make sense. That makes sense. That's what I wanted to show you. What I wanted to show you, hello, Mr. Seth Sparks, is that I have got Richard Owen on the show. And very hard for me to resist embarrassing him. So I'm just going to go ahead and embarrass him. Richard is truly one of the smarter people, maybe smartest people that I've ever met in my life. He was the CEO of a company called Satmetrix. These guys created the Net Promoter Score. Maybe I'll let him tell you what the Net Promoter Score is. But I felt it was one of the most important metrics in marketing and certainly a foundational element in my book, Flip the Funnel. And I was invited to speak and keynote at several of their annual customer events in London, in San Diego, went all over the show, San Francisco. And Richard always opened the conference. They always made me close the conference for some reason. I think he was trying to relegate me to the end. But Richard opened the conference. And I've never heard a CEO speak this well and this dynamically and this creatively. Just the knowledge, the expertise that he has and how he chose to tell those stories. I never forgot his presentations and I never forgot him. And we've remained friends to this day. So I'm happy that he's going to be coming aboard. And, we'll talk about what we're actually going to talk about. as well. And as I said to Richard when we were talking earlier, I said to him, you know, some guests I write out a bunch of questions. Others I just have like 3 general areas. But with you, I don't have any notes. I just have what you want to talk about. And we'll talk about that in a moment. In fact, you know, if I was to show you my screen at the back, this was the restaurant that Richard and I went to the last time we spoke, or even you know, the last time we saw each other in the real world before things went crazy. And I said to him earlier, Richard, this is just you and me sitting in our virtual restaurant catching up. You don't take show notes or questions on a piece of paper, you know, when you're catching up with an old friend. And so, you know, we're not going to be doing that at all. Wanted to just show you next week's interviews. It's very business heavy next week, but don't be confused by that, because these people know a whole bunch of things about things that you should care about justice, about creativity, about trends, about advocacy, about content strategy and content creation. It's going to be an awesome week, and I'm now fully booked up into and almost finished the 3rd week in July. It's just unbelievable keeping this thing going and how much energy it's giving me. I get the energy because of you. I get the energy because of your likes, your comments, your shares, your subscribes. Please keep on doing that, and please keep on telling people about this. If you like this, don't keep it to yourself, because that would be selfish. Please don't share it. Today is National Making Life Beautiful Day, and I think that goes back to what Jan was saying as well, which is we've got to be able to see the joy, we've got to make the joy, we've got to be able to see the beauty, we've got to be able to find that silver lining, and if it doesn't exist, we've got to uncover it, or we've got to create it, or we've got to take a silver magic marker and make sure that it happens. Birthdays. Well, you know, a bunch of birthdays, but I want to single out Mr. Ray Melmond, who I refer to as the Commander. Now, Ray is married to my #1 fan, which is my mother-in-law, and I'm hoping my mother actually is not watching, otherwise I just got myself into trouble. I have 2 #1 fans, my mother and my mother-in-law, and they're watching every episode of mine. My mother-in-law is married to Ray. And, you know, as most of you know, if you've been watching, my father died a long time ago. So I have 0 fathers, but I'm proud to say that I have 2 father-in-laws. And that's how I regard Ray. So Ray, the reason why I didn't wish you a happy birthday when I emailed you earlier was because I wanted to wish you a happy birthday live on CoronaTV. Happy birthday to the Commander, and I will call you later, and hope you're having a good day and hope you're watching. Of course, I don't want to leave out my LinkedIn birthday friends. Happy birthday to you. And before I forget, my cousin as well, Lily Kaplan, happy birthday to Lily. I think I got all of you. Well, it's time for the seated soliloquy. And today I'm just going to focus exactly on what I think Richard and I are going to be talking about, and something that I care deeply about, and I know that he does. And really, you know, it is a topic that I think we all need to pay attention to. So you've all heard that saying, right? What's in a name? Well, a lot, actually. For example, the difference between democratic socialism and capitalism, or perhaps I should say the evolution of capitalism. You all know that I'm a big fanboy of Chucky Darwin, that wild and crazy guy. Turns out he knew a thing or two about adaptation. Look, I wasn't on board the HMS Beagle when it sailed to the Galapagos, but considering his position, Darwin's position, on the importance of improv and improvisation, his sets must have been killer. I wonder what Darwin would have said about capitalism, making money, a lot of it, you know, Bobby Axelrod, billions. I wonder if he would have looked at it as a species, and to that end applied the same rules about survival. I wonder if he would have concluded that without change, it too would have gone the same way as the dinosaur. Wouldn't you agree, Sir Richard Owen? Bernie had it right. There I said it. He only made one mistake, which was to use the S word. That's socialism if you're taking notes. Look, it's okay to look back into the past and even to learn from it. But what is required now is to move forward. And that requires taking a page out of the Business Roundtable book. These guys issued a statement in 2019, guys and girls, that the central purpose of a corporation is to serve all stakeholders, not just external shareholders. Doing good and making money are not mutually exclusive. One might be entirely dependent on the other. In actual fact, they are inextricably connected. I'm not alone in terms of supporting this worldview. It's gaining popularity and momentum, and it will prevail because it is the right thing to do. It's common sense, it's good business sense. Capitalism needs to evolve. It is evolving, and it will continue to evolve in a world that must recognize and reward all talent, not necessarily equally, but without question, more fairly. And now it gives me great pleasure to bring on my guest. Mr. Richard Owen is the founder of OCX Cognition, a technology and data company focused on customer experience. He's best known for his incredible seminal work around Net Promoter Score, where his team led the original development of the methodology, and his new organization is committed to building the next generation now of CX analytics, the future, the evolution of Net Promoter Score. Aside from a corporate career at Dell, where he became the global head of e-commerce, Richard has been CEO of 3 technology startups. One he took public on the NASDAQ, and the other Satmetrix, which he sold to NICE Systems. He is a professional entrepreneur, an amateur economist, holding degrees from MIT and Nottingham University in England. And sadly, unfortunately, we can't all be perfect. He is a fan of Liverpool Supporters Club. It pains me to say that, but welcome to the show, Mr. Richard Owen.
I'm so sorry about that. It struck me, Joseph, when you were talking earlier, and you said that this whole debate when you were getting your haircuts and about ugliness, I'm always reminded that my wife likes to say that I have such a good face for radio. And, I'm not sure on that count that I'm doing any better. So it's nice to be with you, though.
Well, at least I've got hair, so I suppose that's okay.
No, I do have hair. This is my hairstyle of choice. If I just let it go, it'd be down to my shoulders.
I like it. You're almost like a character from like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels,
I'm definitely trying to channel my inner Guy Ritchie if I can get there, yes. I need some novel name like, Handsome Richard or, Bob the Sausage Man, if you're going to really fit that image.
Hey, Bob Farnham, please make sure that you give us that hashtag, Bob the Sausage Man. From now on, I'm only going to refer to you as Bob the Sausage Man.
I'll live with that.
I was playing around with you earlier because this is the image that I actually put up on the screen. This is Sir Richard Owen, and I presume you know who he is.
Yeah, and in fact, a bust of him used to exist in the entrance to the Natural History Museum. So as you walked in, he was right there.
And I think he was the creator or the founder of the Natural History Museum. And from my very lazy research, I think he coined the term or dinosaur.
Dinosaur, it was the term he coined the term. You can't really say you invented dinosaurs, right? I don't think that's quite accurate, but he definitely created the term.
Well, that would have been fairly arrogant of him. But the reason why I put that in as well is, we're talking about evolution, we're talking about Darwin, we're talking about dinosaurs, not us, although we are getting older. But I just thought that would be a good segue. And of course, he's knighted, and I'm sure you will be. It's got to be coming soon, right?
After the show, I suspect. I think this will push the Queen over the edge.
Or you might be deported.
Yeah, I'm not sure which country I would get deported from first, though. Maybe both America and the UK would decide neither want me.
Do you remember there was? Did you ever watch that movie Johnny Dangerously with Michael Keaton? Well, the villain Roman, I think his name was Roman Moroni. The headline was Roman Moroni deported to Sweden, claims he was never from there. That was a great line. But anyway, we digress. So as I was saying to people earlier, clearly you and I have never met before. We don't know each other. Do you remember the restaurant, by the way?
Oh, yes, it's a wonderful restaurant. I mean, New York, you're really spoilt, right? When you actually had restaurants, you could visit them. It was one of the best reasons to be in New York.
Yeah, so I did something terrible. The restaurant is called Zuma. It is on Madison, and I want to say like 40th or 39th. And I did something terrible, heinous that night, which is, I think it was like my daughter's birthday, or there was a reason I needed to be home. And I suddenly looked at my watch and I realized that I had about 3 minutes to catch the train at the exact moment that the check was bought.
It was brilliant. And how you figured out the timing that precisely, I don't know. I mean, to even spot the waiter coming with the check, I missed him completely, but you were right on it. The moment it looked like somebody had to pay, you were right there and out the door. It's very impressive. Yeah,
so now I suppose I can tell you all these years later that I actually don't have a daughter. So, you know, I'm kidding, I do. I'm getting myself into way too much trouble right now. But it doesn't seem like my daughter's watching. It doesn't seem like my mother's watching, so I'm in good shape. So Richard, I was saying to people earlier that, like, with you, it was just about me emailing you last night. And I was like, hey, Richard, what's on your mind? What do you want to talk about? And this is what you wrote. And you basically, this whole idea, like these strange times, right? This idea that there is no normal for business, new old, customers expecting more, not just services and products, but moral companies, stakeholder capitalism. And if we're confusing the role of the corporation, how to really drive change in capitalist society, hint, it's about profits, not posturing. So for me, it made me immediately think of this whole meme, if you will, of the evolution of capitalism. You know, one of the pillars in Built to Suck is corporate citizenship. If you want to do good, you have to be good. So I'm going to turn it over to you to give me your soliloquy. And the only thing I'll say before I do hand it over to you, and then I'm going to go get a beer and make myself a fried egg while you do your thing, is that, you know, I think the interesting part, why I'm so fascinated to have this conversation with you, is because I know that your lens is this customer obsessed or centric lens. So it's one thing to talk about how capitalism needs to evolve. It's another thing to approach it from a customer lens. And that's why I'm so excited and intrigued to hear your perspective.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, I think that, as you say right now, there's a debate that started, you know, and it didn't start recently. It started probably a couple of years back about what the role of the corporation is. And we had this movement, and full credit to the likes of Jamie Dimon for putting up the notion that the company should be much more than just a profit-driven organization. But it's something of an unsatisfying conversation to have, because at the end of the day, corporations are legally obliged to be profit-seeking organizations. And so talking about it as if somehow we're going to change the purpose of the organization, to me seems like it's creating a great story, but it doesn't feel like it's resulting in a practical change. And I think it's very easy for leaders in business to say, we want these broad societal goals. We should care more about stakeholders. We should care about diversity. But I don't have a tremendous amount of confidence that's actually going to change a great deal in the universe, because it runs, in their minds, counter-directional to what corporations are supposed to be doing, and in fact, legally obliged to be doing. So what we need to do is find a way to make this obviously in everyone's best interests, so corporations do what they do really well, which is serve their shareholders. And I think positioning social, moral, diversity, ecological issues as a counterpoint to profits is a huge mistake, because we're creating this notion that You have to surrender profitability to do these things. And as I say, that's always going to fail. In a capitalist society, if you're asking companies to buck their fiduciary responsibility and actually buck their prime directive in order to serve these other goals, you're going to get a lot of people say, well, yes, of course we do that. That's extremely important. And then they won't do it. Now, you mentioned, Net Promoter Score. And I think, forget for a second the mathematics of NPS and whether it's a good idea or a good metric. Its biggest contribution, I would argue, is that it enabled an awful lot of leaders around the world to say customers are important and customers should be the center of our business. It sounds completely obvious. Why would you run a business any other way? But why did it work so well, Joseph? And I would say it worked well for two primary reasons. One, it created a measurable way of thinking about business performance. And secondly, it created a measurable way that actually linked to profits. There it is, the profit word again. And any change you want to create in the company to get them to be better customer driven usually has those two ingredients. One, it's something you can measure in the organization. And two, it's something that people are convinced drives profitability. And we may have stumbled across the simplest solution to any mechanism to get corporations to behave differently. Find a way to measure things that is clear, simple, definitive, agreed upon. There's a general consensus it's a good way to measure things. And then persuade everybody and demonstrate to people that actually improving that measurement creates better outcomes. Let me apply it to a very topical discussion. And then,
well, I'm going to pause you for 1 second because I think it probably would, we should probably just take a tiny step back and explain Net Promoter Score for people that haven't heard of it before. Should I try and see if I was paying attention in school?
Go for it.
So, well, and I'll say it in my waxing lyrical because I was a big fan. So these geniuses, I mean Richard, came up with this idea. I'm giving you credit for it. It was one simple question. It was like the ultimate question. And it was just one question. How likely are you to recommend product X or service Y to a family member or a friend or someone else? That's it. Just one question. Every time you've been asked that question, here's a little reveal. It's Net Promoter Score. And on the basis of that, and this is what blew my mind, 0 to 10. If you answered 9 or 10, you were called a promoter. If you answered 7 or 8, you were called a passive. And 0 to 6, you were called a detractor. Imagine that, 6 out of 10. That seems like a good grade, like a good rating, but you would actually be a detractor. And then the Net Promoter Score was the percentage of promoters less the percentage of detractors. And then the genius part of it, which is what Richard was talking about, they could tie that score to profitability. When the score went up, their profits went up. When the score went down, profits went down. How did I do?
You did really, really well. The only thing that wasn't true was all the hard work around this was done by Fred Reicheld and Laura Brooks, as you know, and I shamelessly rode on their coattails on this.
I know. I was just, I was just trying to give you
credit. I appreciate it. But it's a great description, and I think that as you say, most people see it pop up in surveys all the time, and they say, "Wow, everyone's asking the same question. Why?" And the reason why is because that data drives a lot of corporate behavior. And the reasons corporations behave that way is because they think that performance of that metric, that question, directly impacts their profitability. They're very motivated to get that, lots and lots of customers, I should say, to give them 9s and 10s. And so that's why it's so popular. But think about applying the same principles to another topic that we might care deeply about. We want to change the nature of corporations so there's more diversity in corporations. And you say, well, what's the formula for success? Well, it's the same formula. You really need two things. You need a way of measuring it that people feel is credible. And you need to show a connection between it and financial outcomes, performance. So everyone says more diverse corporations perform better than, they generate better profitability, better growth. But if you can show that linkage and you can get people to measure it, boards, investors, Wall Street, all of these really powerful engines are primed to find ways to rally behind growth and profitability ideas. And so you imagine if you're a Wall Street investor and you're saying, do I want to invest in this company? And this company's knocking it out the park on some form of diversity index that everyone sees as a future prediction of growth, then that investor says, that's a stock I want to invest in. And believe me, management teams, boards, everybody shifts in that direction. That's the way corporate ownership works in capitalist economies. It's leveraging what works as opposed to, spending a lot of time focused on mechanisms that don't really change the fundamental ways corporations operate.
All right. So now the thing in my mind I'm thinking of is it's something that I've still been unable to prove, but I've wanted to, which is we know our gut tells us that it's the golden rule, right? Treat people the way you would expect it to be treated. My hypothesis was cost per referral, which is my gut was that it costs less to acquire a new customer via an existing one than it does to acquire a new customer through advertising and paid media. And if a customer is being acquired through a recommendation, a referral, advocacy, they're going to come in because that source was more credible, it was more authentic. They're going to be, by definition, a more valuable customer over the life of, over that lifetime. But we haven't proven that, or at least because if it were proven, I think advertising would collapse.
Well, there's some really good studies that actually support that. And so, what's proof, right? If you don't know the fundamentals, no amount of data will persuade you because you have so much confirmation bias. But if you look at the objective evidence, in fact, it tends to play out the way you talk about it. Here's an interesting nuance. If you refer somebody to a company, what you're doing is you're using your knowledge of that person, right? If you were to say to a friend, hey, Richard, I think you'll really like this product or service. You're basically saying, I know you, I know this product or service. I'm pretty sure that you're a good fit for it. Now, your knowledge of the relationship is so much better than an advertising agency would have of a consumer. You're probably more likely to be right, which means that referral is going to be more valuable than a customer that's gained by just seeing a billboard on the freeway and saying that looks like an interesting product. So the lifetime value, if you like, of the customer is higher. It's a better fit. It's a more efficient use of company resources. Referral and word of mouth is just a great way to build businesses. And, I think the world often divides itself up into extreme cases. You've got some companies that don't need advertising because they are essentially growing because their customers love them. Look, we forget about this, but Starbucks didn't go out there and say, announcing the best coffee shop in Seattle, let's go and, come visit our version that we just opened up in New York. It was a word of mouth business. It grew globally as a word of mouth business. On the other hand, companies that have very poor customer reputations spend an awful lot of money on advertising trying to persuade you that actually they're really great businesses because they've got a very leaky bucket and they're having to pour more and more in at the top and spend more money. Have you ever noticed how some of the worst companies with reputations are the ones who spend most marketing dollars trying to remedy it? And it's upside down thinking.
Well, as they say, you can't put lipstick on a pig. So we've come to the part of the show where I show a quote, and then my guest has to tell me who said this. Companies should not have a singular view of profitability. There needs to be a balance between commerce and social responsibility, and those that are authentic about it will make more money.
Well, I was going to guess Jamie Dimon, but.
Well, this is just because of the serendipity of the show. It was actually Howard Schultz. So a Starbucks reference, there you go. That was just good timing. We did not rehearse that. But, two things come out of this, Richard, which is making me think now. First of all, what if actually it isn't about making more money? What if it's actually about even staying in business, because companies that are not thinking smartly, strategically, authentically, morally about responsibility, in light of everything that's going on in the world right now, from layoffs and massive unemployment because of COVID, through Black Lives Matter. What if customers, and specifically younger ones, are basically saying, I'm not going to give you my business, period, if I don't see a base level of commitment and investment?
Well, so in some ways, let me phrase that as it's an extreme case of poor profitability, right? It's basically profitability taken to zero equals, or taken to a sufficiently negative extent equals, you're going out of business. Look, here's a thing to remember. In almost every industry, a relatively small number of companies do really, really well. And an awful lot of companies do so-so. And a fair number of companies go out of business, right? So the few companies that do really, really well are usually the ones that get in front of the realities of the marketplace and their employees. And they lead and they take advantage of that. And they tend to monopolize the profits, at least for the industry. And so I think that, yes, companies are going to get left behind. And they're going to get left behind because their customers and their employees don't see them as simply a product. They see themselves as buying a brand. They see themselves as buying a complete experience. And they see themselves as consuming the moral position of the company as part of that. And I think that's especially pronounced for a demographic that's, say, under 35 years old right now. If you look at the data, these people say, it matters who I'm doing business with. I have a moral compass. So it's good business. We're not asking companies to do something which is actually a sacrifice for them. We're strongly recommending that they think about this as an incredible opportunity, not just to improve life for their shareholders, but actually stay in business, to your point. And we mustn't position this as a either or, sacrifice profits to do the right thing. It doesn't make sense. What makes sense is, let's find a way to actually enhance our profitability by doing the right thing. And usually those things line up. By the way, if they don't line up, Joseph, that's the role of government. So it's not necessarily the role of the corporation to solve a fundamental disconnect like that. It doesn't work well in our society to have companies try and solve a conflict like that. We have to solve that through government. It's sort of like, the players on the football pitch are the companies, the referees are the government. And if the rules of the game don't make sense, we need to change the rules of the game. The players can't just decide, well, I'm going to grab the football and run the English football and run down the field because I think that's a better way to play. The rules are established somewhere else. So we can't expect corporations to solve all these problems on their own. Our society is not structured that way. What we can expect them to do is figure out that today we have a unique opportunity in our society because profitability, moral direction, issues like the environment, issues like diversity, issues like stakeholder capitalism actually uniquely align with business opportunity. This is everything swimming in the same direction. And so we need to help leadership in organizations quantify, understand that, and boards and leadership teams find the path to make that connection. If they can make the connection, you've got these, Adam Smith's invisible hand, you've got billions of entrepreneurs all pulling together. And believe me, if we can get society like that pulling together, what we're going to see is a huge improvement very, very quickly. And that's the fastest way our societies transition.
I mean, you said, that was very eloquent, spoken like a knight of the round table. To be. There were a bunch of things that jumped out at me. And one of them is this idea of, I think companies and leaders right now are so afraid right now to, listen, you have dumb statements like, the CEO of CrossFit or the ex-CEO of CrossFit. But there's almost this fear of whatever you say, you're going to be criticized. You're going to have someone from one side or the other. And I think the point that you're making is we should absolutely understand and recognize the role of and the importance of profits and profitability. It's not an either or, it's an and that's why even in my soliloquy, I was talking about the fact that these two are inextricably connected and linked. And in fact, by doing the one, the other one is almost inevitably going to be the outcome.
Yeah, and I think that when we position these as alternatives, we do put all these leaders in terrible choices. Now, they're paid the big bucks, right? So you could say too bad. But at the end of the day, we don't want to put every leader of a large corporation in a spot where they feel doing the right things in conflict with doing the thing that they are obliged to do for their shareholders. We want them to feel like doing the right thing is great for everybody. And I think many of them do believe that, but sometimes they lack the tools and they lack the sort of frameworks for executing that. And that's where I think companies are going to progress. But I do believe, look at it from an employee perspective. We're in a talent race. We need talented people. Every corporation will recognize talent's the key to success. And if you want to hire talented people, especially young talented people, you're going to have to provide a place to work where they identify with the values of your corporation. It's not enough just to say, here's a paycheck, show up for work. You've got, look at what's happening at Facebook, for example. And you could argue that maybe companies like that have opened a bit of a Pandora's box by saying everybody should chip in with their point of view. Oh, hold on a second, not that point of view. But I think that the reality is people want to feel like they're employed by a company where they strongly identify with not just it as a profitable for-profit business, but a business that they can feel proud of, that they feel like shares some moral values and a calling that's beyond profits. Shareholders care about profits. Employees care about more than that.
But now let's bring it back to customers, and it's a kind of two-parter. One is I want to just hear from you your specific point of view in terms of the evolution of whether we call it service, experience, centricity. I call it obsession. What does customer, insert word here, look like in this post-COVID world? That including but not limited to what we've been discussing today, which is the moral fiber and integrity of a company. What does that look like coming out of this?
So I think that the first word that springs to mind is complex. We have some big themes emerging. First of all, digital universes sort of colliding somewhat violently with, let's call it the analog universe, right? Your restaurant on the corner, which is an analog business, people cook food, you sit down, you eat it, suddenly, gets impacted by the reality that you have to do digital purchasing, digital delivery. Maybe it's through a third party. The third party is a platform that attracts individual contractors to drive cars for them, right? And so the complexity of that has increased. You've got lots more stakeholders. And so companies are wrestling with the right digital analog balance. And by the way, I think for most companies, solving that problem is not going to be about saying we want to be an all digital company or we want to be, an analog company. It's about understanding your customer, not somebody else's, who your customer is, and how are you going to build journeys and experiences for them that make them love your brand, love your company, keep coming back for more, refer their friends. And you've got to sort of go to first principles and figure out what elements should be digital, what elements shouldn't be, and figure that out. And so that's one of the big shifts that's been accelerating. But look, it's been going on for 25 years. We're just seeing another step function shift created by the coronavirus. But it's on a long-term trajectory to create this blended society. And it can go in reverse. Look, Amazon's opening street stores. So it's not the case that it's a one-way street. It's a case that customers want this environment. I think the second big trend is to delight your customers. You need to have an engaged employee organization. If you're employing human beings, so you're not an all server farm company, your employees create experiences. That restaurant that you're standing in right now, a big part of their service and their experience are the people who work there. And those people are incredibly valuable in shaping customer experiences. And it's not just about figuring out whether they happen to like working there. A lot of it's to do with whether or not they share the purpose, the mission of the company. Do they understand what it's going to take to delight customers? There's that high degree of alignment. So this employee aspect of how you delight customers is only going to get more pronounced, and it's going to become another big factor. So I'd say digital is huge, employee is huge, and all of these other topics we talk about through society kind of run through the employee side of the equation. Like computers don't have moral compasses, employees do. So we have to make that work. I think the other big change here that we're wrestling with, and this is an odd one, is we're wrestling with supply chains and value and just global operational problems. How do we balance what our customers want in terms of cheap product, but they also want timely product, they want quality product, maybe they want made in America product, or they want made in England product. And so we're going to have to strike balances there again. And I think that if there's one thing, Joseph, that I'm always reminded is markets gradually become more and more defined and smaller and smaller and smaller. You can now build companies serving slithers of markets, and you can just be the perfect business for this slither of a market. And so real innovators are saying, how do I serve a narrow group of customers exceptionally well? And you'll win that section of the market. It's very hard to serve all these customers uniformly. Very, very difficult.
I mean, if there's one word that kept on, bouncing around the hollow area that is called my brain, was the word complex. As you were talking about it, you said it's complex, and then you proceeded to go into it, and I was like, man, am I relieved that I'm not the CEO of a public company right now, because it's just that easy, right? I mean, if it were that these guys haven't even figured out digital. I mean, you're talking about the restaurant on the corner, and the large corporations, they're still, they've been forced to have to embrace digital. But the one word in there is data. And I would love for you, because I'm fascinated by you and what you're up to, and you could have been doing anything that you wanted to do, and this is what you are doing, which is it's not even a plug as much as it is, tell me about the company and this this next generation of customer experience analytics, because I know that you know the market, and I know that you are figuring out what that niche looks like and what that opportunity looks like.
Yeah, so I think what we've done an amazing job over the last 20 years is looking backwards and saying what happened. And competent companies today have data about them that sort of tells them what happened in the past, and they can learn from that. And if you don't know what happened to you in the past, then you're really not technically competent at all today. You don't have data. But most companies have gotten to that point. Now what we're preoccupied is what's going to happen in the future. Now, as the famous quote is, prediction's really difficult, especially when talking about the future. Bada-boom. But I think that essentially we want to know what's coming around the corner. Are our customers going to stay with us? Very simple question. Right? We're no longer thinking of customers as events. We're thinking of customers as relationship. We want to do business with people forever. Every time I acquire a customer is pretty expensive. I'd like to keep doing business for 20 years, 30 years. So I want to know what's it going to take to retain them. And I want to know, are they going to disappear a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 6 months from now? And I want to know soon enough that I can do something about it. Because if I can figure out where my risks are in my customers, I can do something before it happens. Otherwise, I'm simply watching things whip by. It just happened in the past. I lost a customer. Why did it happen? Too late. So our focus, and I think where the customer data industry is increasingly focused, is how do we give companies information about the future in time for them to do something about it? Now, look, we're not inventing time machines, although I could probably put a deck together and some venture capitalist would probably give us $1 billion if I just claimed I could. Apparently that's a very popular tactic these days. But you can't predict perfectly the future. But what you can do is you can start to give people directional indications. Things are improving, things are getting worse. These are the hot spots, these are the problems. And so customer data is moving to predictive. And I think the holy grail is when teams and customers feel like I can kind of react in time to do something. I'm not constantly behind the curve. So we're moving from the past looking to the forward looking. That's the simplest way of thinking about it.
If I could just encapsulate what you said, when you spoke about customers as relationships versus events, the relationship part is nothing new to anyone that focuses on customers. You and I do, and we've always spoken about return on relationship and lifetime value. The thing that struck me is that with all this inflow and influx of data, and this introduction of technology and automation, that what it's actually allowed, what's happened is we've moved back further and further away from that utopian goal of relationship, and it has just become all about the numbers and the decimal points and acceptable levels of attrition. And so it was just that word event, such a stark idea that when we think about transactions, right, transactions of events as opposed to building of relationships and consumption of the moral fiber of a company, I think you've drawn a very, very clear line in the sand. And I think it's very clear which side of history we want to be as business people, or we will be history. That's how I would frame it.
Look, there's all these reports now, to show who was in the S&P 500 20 years ago versus today, right? And you only have to look over any period of time to see that companies are constantly getting sort of, should we say, relegated out of the Premier League of businesses. And, and I think that that's only going to accelerate. I think complexity and speed has only increased. So I think companies now need to move quicker. And, you talk about data, there's enormous amounts of data, but we're not really short of data. What we're short of is an ability to get some intelligence out of the data, to understand the data. And a lot of companies have great data assets, but really struggle to make sense of it. Because humans, by the way, are really good at that. Machines don't make sense of data. Machines just run numbers, they run algorithms. Humans are actually pretty good at taking complex concepts and processing them. So there's something about the combination of data, information, insights, and humans that really works in these businesses and gets people moving forward. But you're right, there's an arc to this, Joseph. There's a history arc. And if you're on the wrong side of it, I think by the time you realize you're on the wrong side of it, you're not going to be in a position to turn it around.
And I think the final word is yours, because you brought it back to human beings and talent, and that should always be the final word, which is take care of your people, take care of your customers, and they'll take care of you.
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. Look, I mean, technology industry, all my career working around computers, and the fact is that most businesses are really human ecosystems. Computers are just plumbing. And at the end of the day, I think the best people win out.
Human beings 1, the Matrix 0. This has been Sir Richard Owen, or at least as of tomorrow, he will be officially a Sir, the creator of the Net Promoter Score. I'm just kidding, I'm going to get you into trouble. You can find out more about him, whether it's visiting him on LinkedIn, going to ocxcognition.com, or of course, come over to the Zoom after show where Richard and I will be hanging out a little bit in our Zoom. It's not Zoom, it's Zoomer, in our Zoomer room. There's the Zoomer room. Richard, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.